Welcome to AFROPULSE Stories, where modern African tales come alive. Don't just watch, be part of the journey. Hit like, tap subscribe, and share your thoughts below. Now lean in, today's story begins. The city glittered beneath the night sky, towers of glass and steel piercing the heavens like monuments to power. At the very top of one of those towers sat Ethan Cole, a man whose name alone could shake markets and bend governments. Billionaire, visionary, ruthless. He had been called it all. Yet tonight, his penthouse felt less like a palace and more like a prison. He stood before the wall of glass, staring at the city lights that shimmered like a million diamonds scattered at his feet. Behind him, silence filled the massive space. No laughter, no footsteps, no warmth. Just silence, the kind that claws at your soul when you've run out of people to pretend for. On the polished marble table lay untouched wine, a single photograph face down, as if hiding from his gaze. In it was a younger Ethan, smiling alongside a woman who once loved him, and a friend who once swore loyalty. Both had betrayed him. Both were gone. For the first time in years, Ethan felt the weight of his empire crushing him. The contracts, the boardrooms, the jets, the headlines, it all meant nothing. The fortune he built brick by brick now felt like sand slipping through his hands. And then the tears came. He hadn't cried since childhood. Not when he lost his parents. Not when his wife walked away. Not even when his oldest friend stabbed him in the back for a piece of his empire. But tonight, standing in that cold penthouse, Ethan Cole, the man the world called untouchable, broke. His chest heaved, and hot tears streaked down his face, staining the perfect suit that cost more than most men's yearly salaries. He whispered into the emptiness, "Why does it all feel so empty?" His voice echoed off the marble, sounding small in a room designed to impress kings. No one answered, because no one was there. For all his billions, Ethan Cole had never been poorer. The city roared beneath him, horns blaring, lives moving, dreams burning bright. But at the top of the world, he was alone. Alone with his pain. Alone with his regrets. Alone with his tears. And he didn't know it yet. But destiny was about to send him someone from the very bottom of society. Someone with nothing to their name, yet holding the one thing Ethan had lost. Wisdom. The city never slept, but Ethan Cole wished he could. He stormed out of his office after yet another meeting that ended in betrayal. His board had turned against him, whispering in corners, doubting his every move. Power, he realized, was never loyal. He climbed into his sleek black car and drove without direction. Neon lights streaked past as he sped down the empty highway. His grip on the wheel tightened until his knuckles turned white. The tears came again, blurring his vision. He slammed the brakes, stopping under a flickering streetlight. For a moment, the world outside felt like another planet. He lowered his head against the wheel and whispered, "I can't do this anymore." His voice cracked, echoing inside the car. And then, faintly in the distance, he heard humming. A soft, broken tune that didn't belong to the chaos of the city. He frowned, wiped his tears, and followed the sound. At the edge of a deserted park, Ethan saw him, an old man with ragged clothes, sitting on a wooden bench that looked as tired as he did. His beard was unkempt, his shoes worn thin. Yet his humming carried a strange calm, as if he knew peace in a world that had none. Ethan froze, ashamed. A billionaire caught crying in the dark, standing before a beggar. He turned to leave. But then, the man looked up and spoke with a voice steady and clear. "You're crying like a child, dressed like a king." Ethan's pride flared. "You know who I am?" The beggar shrugged. "Does it matter? Tears don't care about titles." For a moment, silence hung between them. The billionaire with everything and the beggar with nothing. Two broken men under one night sky. Ethan scoffed bitterly, brushing his face dry. "What could you possibly know about correcting anything? You're sitting here with nothing." The beggar tilted his head, his tired eyes gleaming with quiet conviction. "I had everything once. Family, home, respect. I lost it all, but I corrected my heart." He pointed to his chest. "And that is the only correction that matters." Ethan laughed, a harsh, empty sound. "You think you can fix me?" A beggar teaching a billionaire. The man's lips curved into the faintest smile. Yes, because I can see what you don't, and I can correct it. Ethan stood stunned. For the first time in years, someone spoke to him without fear, without gain. They sat in silence for a long time. Ethan didn't know why he stayed, only that something about the man's words gripped him. Finally, Ethan broke the quiet. I built empires, flew higher than anyone, and yet I've never felt this empty. The beggar, whose name was Daniel, nodded slowly. Because you built walls, not bridges. You gathered wealth, not people. And when storms come, walls can't hold you. Ethan frowned, anger prickling his pride. But deep inside, the words cut him open. For the first time, the billionaire listened, not as a man of power, but as a broken soul. That night, on a forgotten bench in a dark park, the seeds of transformation were planted. A beggar's wisdom had begun to pierce a billionaire's heart. And neither man knew it yet, but this meeting would change their lives forever. The night was cool, the wind rustling through the trees, carrying with it the quiet weight of truth. Ethan sat stiffly on the park bench, his expensive suit wrinkled against the rough wood. Beside him, Daniel shifted, his ragged coat barely holding back the chill. For a moment, neither spoke. The silence was heavy, almost uncomfortable. Finally, Daniel broke it. You've been talking for hours, billionaire, he said softly, his voice calm yet firm. But tell me, when was the last time you listened? Ethan frowned. I listen all the time. To my advisors, to my board, to the market. Daniel shook his head slowly. No, you hear numbers. You hear strategies. But you don't listen to people. Not to their hearts. Not to their pain. Not even to your own. The words stung. Ethan shifted uncomfortably, ready to argue. But something in Daniel's gaze held him still. Those eyes, tired, weathered, yet piercing, saw right through him. Do you know why you're alone? Daniel continued. Because everyone around you only speaks for gain. And you? You only listen to what benefits you. That's why trust fled. That's why love left. Ethan swallowed hard, his throat dry. No one had ever spoken to him this way. No one dared. Yet every word hit like a hammer breaking glass, shattering walls he didn't even know he built. Ethan hesitated, the words catching in his chest. I don't know if I even remember how to listen. Daniel leaned back, a faint smile curling his lips. Then tonight you'll start. Not with me. Not with your board. Start with yourself. Close your eyes. Listen to your own heart. What does it say? Reluctantly, Ethan obeyed. He shut his eyes, forcing silence into his mind. At first, all he heard was the rush of the city in the distance, the faint hum of traffic, the whisper of wind. But beneath it, something else surfaced. A voice he hadn't heard in years, his own. It whispered of pain, of regret, of fear. The little boy who had lost his parents. The husband who had lost his wife. The friend who had lost his brother in betrayal. All the grief he had buried under money and pride screamed for him to finally listen. His chest ached, and before he knew it, tears streamed again. Daniel nodded knowingly. That's the first step, billionaire. Listening. If you don't hear the broken pieces, how will you ever put them back together? For the first time in years, Ethan Cole didn't feel like a titan. He felt human, fragile, but strangely lighter. The billionaire had received his first lesson from the beggar, and it would not be the last. Ethan Cole returned to his penthouse that night, but something was different. The silence that once wrapped around him like a blanket now felt suffocating. He walked past the polished marble floors, the chandeliers, the endless rows of art, things men would kill to own. But all he could hear were Daniel's words. If you don't hear the broken pieces, how will you ever put them back together? He poured himself a glass of wine, but didn't touch it. He stared at the photo of his ex-wife again. For the first time, instead of anger, he felt regret. Had he ever truly listened to her cries for love? Had he drowned her voice under the noise of money and power? The billionaire, who once believed he had everything, now realized he had never understood the most basic thing, people. And as he lay in bed that night, his empire felt smaller than ever. The next evening, Ethan found himself driving back to the same park. He told himself it was curiosity, but deep down, he knew the truth. He needed Daniel's voice. Daniel sat on the same bench, as if waiting. His eyes lit up with recognition, but he said nothing. Instead, he let Ethan speak. Ethan confessed things he had never told anyone. How his parents' death hardened him, how betrayal made him cruel, how power made him blind. For hours, he poured out pain. When he was done, Daniel finally spoke. "You think you're the only one who lost?" Ethan looked at him, startled. Daniel's voice grew heavier. "I once had what you lost. A wife who loved me. A daughter who adored me. A career that made me proud. And I lost it all, not because others betrayed me, but because I betrayed myself with greed and pride." The billionaire stared in silence. For the first time, he saw the beggar not as a stranger, but as a mirror. Daniel leaned forward, his voice firm. "You have billions, Ethan. But your wealth is your prison. You count money, but you never count blessings." Ethan frowned. "Blessings?" "Yes," Daniel said softly. "Gratitude is wealth the world can't take. Even I, a beggar, have blessings. The sunrise I wake to, the strangers who spare a coin, the breath in my lungs. Gratitude makes me richer than you." Ethan scoffed, but that night, he went home and tried something different. For the first time, he whispered, "I'm grateful. Grateful for the roof above him. Grateful for the breath in his chest. Grateful, even for the beggar who made him question everything." The words felt awkward, but strangely, they eased the emptiness, just a little. The next day, at work, Ethan tested Daniel's lesson. In the boardroom, instead of snapping at his assistant, he paused and thanked her for staying late. The look of shock, and then relief, on her face unsettled him. Later, he listened to a young intern's idea. Just listened. No interruption. No dismissal. The boy's face lit up, as if someone had handed him a crown. Ethan felt something shift. The walls he had built all his life had small cracks now. And through those cracks, light seeped in. For the first time, the billionaire realized Daniel was right. Gratitude wasn't weakness. It was power, the kind he had never known. And yet, he could already sense trouble. His board members, the same men who once admired his ruthlessness, now eyed him with suspicion. To them, Ethan was changing, and change in their world was dangerous. The boardroom was colder than usual that morning. A long table stretched like a battlefield, polished to perfection, surrounded by men in dark suits. Ethan Cole entered quietly, his steps less commanding than before. To his board, it wasn't humility, it was weakness. He began the meeting differently. No threats. No raised voice. He asked questions. He listened. He even smiled at the young intern who nervously presented a new idea. But as the room emptied, whispers filled the air. Has he gone soft? He's losing his edge. He's not the Ethan we built this empire with. Later, two senior board members cornered him. "Ethan, kindness is for churches, not corporations," one said with a smirk. "The empire runs on fear. If you stop being ruthless, you'll be eaten alive." Ethan stared at them, the old fire flickering in his eyes. But it was weaker now, dimmed by Daniel's lessons. That evening, he drove back to the park, frustration boiling in his chest. Daniel sat on the bench, as if waiting for him. "They think I'm weak," Ethan confessed bitterly. "They're ready to devour me." Daniel tilted his head. "And what do you think?" Ethan hesitated. "I don't know. Maybe they're right." Daniel's voice cut through the night like steel. "No. They fear you because you're changing. The world respects cruelty because it's easy. But strength, true strength, is kindness. And it terrifies them." Ethan sank into the bench, the words heavy on his shoulders. He had spent his life conquering men with fear. Could he survive a world where power came through compassion? As the night deepened, Daniel leaned closer. "The choice is yours, billionaire. Be the man the world fears, or become the man the world will never forget." Ethan closed his eyes. For the first time, he realized change wasn't just about lessons. It was about war. And the battlefield was no longer out there. It was inside him. The city buzzed with life, But Ethan's heart felt heavier than the skyscrapers that surrounded him. He returned to the park, pacing before Daniel like a restless lion in a cage. "They betrayed me," Ethan spat, his voice sharp, his eyes burning. "My wife, my best friend, two people I trusted most. They took what was mine and left me bleeding. And you sit here telling me to be kind." Daniel watched him quietly, his gaze steady, unshaken. "Yes," he said simply. Ethan froze. "Yes? That's all you have to say?" Daniel leaned forward, his voice low but firm. "Forgiveness is not weakness, Ethan. It's freedom. You carry them with you every day, not in your house, not in your office, but here." He tapped his chest. "Their betrayal lives in you. Forgiving them doesn't erase what they did. It erases their power over you." Ethan shook his head violently. "You don't understand. They destroyed me. They laughed while they did it." His fists clenched, trembling with rage. Daniel's eyes softened. "I understand more than you think. Do you know what I lost? A daughter." Ethan blinked. Daniel's voice cracked as he continued. "She begged me to come home, to spend time with her. But greed kept me in offices, in bars, chasing deals. One day she was gone. A sickness I never saw. I blamed the world. I blamed God. But the truth? It was me. My pride. My choices. And the only way I can breathe now is because I forgave myself." Silence fell. Ethan's chest tightened. For the first time, he saw Daniel not just as a beggar, but as a man carved by pain deeper than his own. "Forgive them, Ethan," Daniel whispered. "Not for their sake, for yours." Ethan dropped onto the bench, his face buried in his hands. Memories surged, the laughter he once shared with his wife, the bond he once had with his friend, shattered by betrayal. He had fed his pain for years, but it had only consumed him more. The tears came again, unstoppable. The billionaire, who once swore never to bow, now wept openly before a beggar. Daniel placed a trembling hand on his shoulder. Tears water the seed of forgiveness. Let it grow. For the first time in years, Ethan didn't feel anger when he thought of his betrayers. He felt sorrow and release. The lesson cut deeper than any deal, any empire, any loss. Forgiveness was not about them. It was about reclaiming himself. Rain poured that night, sheets of water drumming against the city streets. Ethan returned to the park, umbrella in hand, but the bench was empty. Panic struck him. Daniel was always there. He searched the dark paths until he saw a figure crumpled under the trees. His heart dropped. Daniel beaten, bruised, his ragged coat soaked through with blood. "Daniel." Ethan knelt, lifting him gently. The old man's lips quivered. "Thieves wanted my coins." Without hesitation, Ethan scooped him into his arms and rushed him into his black car. For the first time in his life, the billionaire wasn't rushing to a deal, a boardroom, or a gala. He was rushing to save someone. Hours later, in a private hospital suite, Daniel lay on crisp white sheets. Doctors fussed, nurses whispered. And in the waiting room, the headlines were already buzzing. "Billionaire saves homeless man." But Ethan didn't care. For the first time, a life mattered more than his image. The news spread like wildfire. Cameras camped outside the hospital. Reporters shouted. Microphones thrust forward. "Mr. Cole, why a beggar? Is this charity? A publicity stunt? Are you losing your mind?" Ethan ignored them. He stayed at Daniel's bedside, bringing him food, paying his bills, speaking to him as if he were family. But in the boardroom, the scandal brewed hotter. Investors panicked. "A billionaire hand-feeding a beggar," they sneered. "He's ruining the brand." Even his closest executives questioned him. "This isn't you, Ethan. What happened to the man who feared nothing, who cared only for profit?" Ethan's answer was quiet but firm. That man was dying inside. "Daniel saved me." The statement went viral, shaking the world. Some mocked him. Others admired him. But no one ignored him. For the first time in his career, Ethan Cole wasn't trending for his wealth, but for his humanity. As Daniel recovered, Ethan began sharing the lessons he had learned. At a charity gala, instead of boasting about profits, he told the story of the beggar who taught him gratitude and forgiveness. Money builds walls, Ethan told the crowd, but wisdom builds bridges. I was rich in banks, but bankrupt in my soul. A homeless man made me wealthy again. The speech was recorded, uploaded, and within hours, it spread across the globe. Millions watched, millions shared. The Billionaire and the Beggar became a movement. Talk shows debated it. Social media turned it into a trend. Strangers whispered the lessons Daniel had taught him. But while the world celebrated, the storm within Ethan's empire grew darker. His board wasn't done, and his past, his betrayers, were about to return. The hospital room was quiet, sunlight spilling softly across Daniel's frail figure. His bruises had faded, but his body still carried the weight of years on the street. Ethan sat beside him, not in a tailored suit, but in a simple sweater. For once, he didn't look like a billionaire. He looked like a man. Daniel turned his head slowly, his voice raspy but steady. Ethan, do you know what wealth really is? Ethan smiled faintly. I thought I did. Money, assets, control. But I'm learning it's not that. Daniel chuckled weakly. Money can buy food, houses, even loyalty, but it cannot buy peace. It cannot buy love. It cannot buy sleep in the dead of night when guilt claws at your chest. He paused, catching his breath. Then he pointed to his heart. True wealth lives here. In the bonds you build, the lives you touch, the love you give. I lost mine chasing coins. You nearly lost yours building empires. Ethan lowered his gaze. For the first time in his life, he didn't feel proud of his billions. He felt ashamed of how poor he truly was. Daniel's voice softened. When I sit on that bench, strangers pass me by. Some give me a coin, others an insult. But once in a while, someone gives me a smile. That, Ethan, that smile is wealth. It costs nothing, yet it changes everything. Ethan swallowed hard. His throat tightened. How many smiles had he crushed with his arrogance? How many lives had he trampled just to rise higher? Daniel reached out, his frail hand resting on Ethan's. Build bridges now. Use your money as wood and your power as nails. Not to tower over men, but to connect with them. That is the wealth you've been missing. For the first time, Ethan didn't see a beggar before him. He saw a teacher, a mentor, perhaps the only man who had ever told him the truth without fear. And in that quiet hospital room, Ethan Cole, the billionaire the world envied, realized he had just discovered the richest lesson of all. The city skyline glowed golden in the evening light as Ethan sat in his office, staring out of the window. His company was buzzing with whispers about his speeches, about Daniel, about the man he was becoming. For the first time, Ethan didn't mind the noise. He was changing. But then, the past walked through his door. She entered first, Clara, his ex-wife. Elegant, composed, yet her eyes betrayed a flicker of unease. Behind her came Victor, the man who had once been Ethan's best friend, his brother in business, and the one who had betrayed him most. The sight of them together struck like a blade twisting in his chest. Memories surged, their laughter, their schemes, their betrayal. Ethan, Clara's voice was calm, almost pleading. We need to talk. Victor added quickly, we made mistakes. We regret them. Ethan's jaw clenched. Old instincts screamed at him to unleash fury, to remind them of their betrayal, to throw them out of his empire as if they were nothing. His fists curled on the desk. For years, this was the moment he fantasized about. Revenge served cold. But then, Daniel's voice echoed in his mind. Forgiveness is not weakness, Ethan. It's freedom. He leaned back slowly, his eyes piercing them. Why now? Why come back? Clara lowered her gaze. Because we see who you've become. The world sees it too. You're not the Ethan we left behind. You've changed. Victor shifted uneasily. We thought we were strong without you. We were wrong. You don't know how many nights I wished I hadn't betrayed you. Silence hung heavy in the office. Ethan's chest burned with anger, but beneath it, something new stirred. Pity. Not for their loss, but for the emptiness he recognized in their eyes. The same emptiness he once carried. Finally, Ethan stood. His voice was low, steady. You destroyed my trust. You shattered what we had. But I won't let your betrayal chain me anymore. Clara's eyes widened. Does that mean? It means, Ethan interrupted firmly, I forgive you. Not for your sake. For mine. The words stunned them. Stunned even him. For the first time, he felt the heavy chains of bitterness snap free from his soul. Victor's eyes welled with shame. Clara's lips trembled. But Ethan turned away, his heart lighter than it had ever been. Behind him, the two betrayers stood in silence, realizing too late that the man they had broken had rebuilt himself, not with power, but with wisdom. And for the first time, Ethan Cole truly walked as a free man. The world watched Ethan Cole with hungry eyes. Reporters crowded every appearance. Analysts dissected his every word, and investors waited to see if the softened billionaire would crumble. At a global business summit, Ethan stood on stage before thousands. Once, he would have used this moment to boast about profits, acquisitions, and his unmatched power. But tonight was different. He looked into the cameras, his voice steady but filled with conviction. I stand before you as a man who once believed money was the highest form of power. But I was wrong. Power without people is poison. Wealth without love is bankruptcy. And success without forgiveness is failure. Gasps rippled across the hall. Investors shifted uncomfortably. Board members scowled. But others, ordinary people watching from their homes, leaned closer, their hearts stirred. Ethan continued, his eyes unflinching. I forgave the ones who betrayed me, not because they deserved it, but because I refused to let hatred own me any longer. That, my friends, is freedom. That is wealth. The room erupted, not in applause, but in stunned silence. For the first time in his career, Ethan didn't care about approval. He wasn't speaking as a billionaire. He was speaking as a man reborn. And though the business world mocked him, millions across the globe began whispering his words, spreading them like seeds in hungry soil. Ethan Cole had reached his turning point. Weeks later, Ethan returned to the hospital. Daniel's health had worsened. His body was frail, his breath shallow, but his eyes still held that spark, the same fire that had changed a billionaire's heart. Ethan sat beside him, holding his hand tightly. You can't leave me yet, he whispered, his voice trembling. I still need you. Daniel smiled faintly. You don't need me anymore, Ethan. You've already learned the lesson. Tears blurred Ethan's vision. No, Daniel, his voice broke. For a man who once feared nothing, the thought of losing his only true friend was unbearable. Daniel squeezed his hand weakly. You corrected it. The words cut deep. Ethan lowered his head, tears falling freely. No, Daniel, you corrected me. A soft chuckle escaped the beggar's lips. Then, maybe that was my purpose. His eyes fluttered closed. Be wealthy, Ethan, in the things that matter. The room fell silent. The machines hummed. And in that silence, Daniel took his final breath. Ethan held his hand until it grew cold, his heart shattering. The man the world called a beggar had left him richer than all the billions in his banks. For the first time in his life, Ethan cried, not out of loneliness, not out of regret, but out of love. And though Daniel was gone, his lessons would never die. The city gathered that morning not for a business launch, not for a gala, but for something far greater. Cameras lined the streets, reporters filled the sidewalks, and thousands of ordinary people stood shoulder to shoulder, their eyes fixed on the stage. At the center stood Ethan Cole, not in a tailored Armani suit, but in a simple black coat. His face was solemn, but his voice carried the weight of a man reborn. Today, he began, we honor a man the world overlooked. To many, he was just a beggar on a park bench. But to me, he was the greatest teacher I ever had. He taught me gratitude, forgiveness, and the true meaning of wealth. He paused, scanning the crowd. His name was Daniel, and though he had nothing, he gave me everything. The audience was silent, every ear clinging to his words. Ethan lifted a plaque, revealing the name engraved upon it, the Daniel Foundation. This foundation will shelter the homeless, feed the hungry, and remind the world that no life is too small, no soul too broken, to teach wisdom. His voice trembled, but his eyes shone with fierce determination. Through Daniel, I learned that wealth is not counted in dollars, but in lives touched. The crowd erupted into applause. Cameras flashed. Tears flowed freely. Later that night, Ethan returned alone to the park bench where it all began. He sat quietly, listening to the hum of the city. He closed his eyes and whispered, "I hope you see this, Daniel. I hope you know you made me truly rich." The wind stirred the leaves as if answering him, a gentle reminder that some lessons never fade. Ethan smiled through his tears. For the first time in his life, he wasn't chasing numbers, wasn't fighting for control, wasn't hiding behind walls of glass and steel. For the first time, he was at peace. And so the story of a billionaire's tears ended not with power, not with fortune, but with a beggar's lesson that outlived them both, proving that sometimes the poorest man in the world carries the richest truth. Love the story? Don't just watch, like, subscribe, and be part of the AFROPULSE family. Your support keeps the tales alive. See you in the next one.